If you're the owner of a VW Amarok, you don't need me to tell you what a great little truck they are. However, they are known for having a bit of a quirky front end, which can be a big job to change when you upgrade your suspension. Well, today, the boys from Tough Dog are going to share a couple of their tips and secrets that will have you changing your front end in around about an hour. Apart from your basic hand tools, you're going to need a couple of specialised tools in order to do this job. Now, the first thing you're going to need is a couple of deep tube sockets, one in an 18 and one in a 19mm. You're also going to need a couple of extension bars. One of them's your average 4-inch, but the other one needs to be quite long, at least 10 inches or longer, and that's so that you can reach the top nut in the passenger side. The other thing you're going to need is either a cordless or an air-powered rattle gun. The first step is to safely secure the vehicle and carefully remove the entire airbox assembly. Before we can begin dismantling the suspension, we need to take a before measurement. Note this down on the fitting sheet that's provided in your suspension kit. Now it's time to jack the vehicle up and remove the wheel. For this install, we're using a hoist so that we can show you in greater detail how to do the job. But if you're doing this at home, always support the vehicle with an approved chassis stand. Okay, we've removed the wheel. The next step is to remove both the sway bar link and the ABS and brake line bracket from the body of the strut. Now you can go ahead and remove the lowest shock bolt. This is under a bit of tension, so take care when you're removing this bolt. Now we need to undo the upper ball joint mount and give the arm a sharp hit with a hammer to separate the ball joint, which will separate the upper and lower control arms. Now for the tricky bit. Using your deep socket, 4-inch extension bar and rattle gun, remove the top nut from the strut assembly by going through the hole that's found under the airbox, and then from under the car, carefully remove the nut and the large washer. Put these aside for reuse later. Going back through that same hole, we now need to remove the second nut from the top of the strut assembly. And a handy tip here is to use short, sharp blasts of the rattle gun to get the nut undone. Once this nut is out, you've essentially disassembled the strut unit. To remove the coil, you'll need to lever the shock shaft down to make room for it to be removed. You'll need to work quickly here as the factory strut unit is gas charged and the shaft will rebound by itself, which won't give you a great deal of time to work. Now lever the coil down and slip it out to the side of the upper mount and remove the coil. With the coil removed, we can now remove the remaining strut assembly, not forgetting the top hat as well. Okay, so now that you've got the old strut out, you'll need to take the last remaining washer from the old shock shaft and fit that to your new Tough Dog unit. With the washer in place, carefully slip the new coil into position and fit the entire assembly back into position in the Amarok. Now it's time to fit the top hat to the assembly. Take care here to line up the step in the hat with the tail of the coil so that it all fits together as it should. The next tricky step is to extend the strut shaft so that the thread makes its way through the top hat, and then you can get your deep nut back on. Once you've got the nut started, you can then tighten it up using your rattle gun. Okay, once your first nut is nice and tight, we can now refit the large washer and then the last nut and tighten them back up, once again by going through that top hole under the airbox assembly. We can now refit the lower bolt and nut, but we won't tighten this up just yet. Now refit the ball joint and tighten it back up. You may need to use a Torx key to keep the ball joint from spinning. It's time now to refit the ABS and brake line bracket as well as the sway bar link back to the new strut assembly. Once that's done, refit your wheel and tyre and lower the car back to the ground. Now don't forget to tighten up that lower shock mount now that the car is supporting its own weight. Now you can carefully refit the airbox, taking extra care to make sure all of the plugs and hoses are reconnected correctly. Once everything's back together, take an after measurement and jot this down on your fitting sheet. Keep your sheet for future reference in case it's needed. Well, there you go, job's done. It's as simple as that. All that's left to do now is to take it for a test drive, get a wheel alignment, and after 500 k's or so, just check the tightness of all the nuts and bolts that you've played with. Well, if you'd like any more information on the Amarok kit or any suspension kit, simply head to toughdog.com.au.